I want to give a quick shout out to all my patrons. Thank you so much for all of the continued support. And I am done. Okay, so I just got done listening to The Gate of the Feral Gods. This is book 4 of Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinniman. And I want to give you my unedited thoughts upon finishing this book, which was just right now. So, yeah, this is just okay. I'm going to sadly give this one a 3 out of 5 stars, which means it was just And I'm sad to give this score, but honestly, when I judge it compared to the other 3 in the series, it is definitively my least favorite of the 4. I think I've given books 1 and books 3 5 out of 5 stars, and I gave book 2 a 4 out of 5 stars. And this one's, it's got the charm still that makes this series worthwhile for me, and still excited to keep reading, but it just felt so reminiscent of the second book, which was really like a quest book. And instead of like let's try to find the exit of the floor that we're on, and I find myself much more enjoying the latter. So, yeah, I'm disappointed to give this. I love the author. I love the audiobook narrator. I still really like the series, and I have a lot of hope. This series can really turn things back into the direction of what I'm preferring. But honestly, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, I don't know if I'm in the prevalent opinion here. As I look at this book on Goodreads, now I understand Goodreads is not the definitive these ratings are what you should take in them. But I've found Goodreads can be very useful for a number of things. I agree that, saying that this book has a high score correlates to it being a good book is very, that's a huge fallacy. But I do think that when you look at a series and you look at the books within that series and the fans that are voting on those books, that the fans are pretty good at showing you which ones are their favorite or not. And I believe this one out of the 4 has been the highest rated one. So I think it might be a personal preference thing. And I'll talk about those preferences, but yeah, it just didn't work for me as much as I wanted it to. God, I wanted it to. So in general, for the people that have not started this series, and I very much think you should, I'll give you a very, very brief rundown of what the series is all about. So in this series, you've got this main character, Carl, who finds himself essentially forced, not actually, but you'll find out when you read this book, but forced to enter this dungeon along with every other human on Earth that survived this major event that happened with the aliens, to go battle into a dungeon under the earth, and fight floor by floor to try to get to the final floor. I think it's floor 18. And if they make it that far, which they have almost no hope of doing so, according to the rules of the book, then they can essentially save Earth or take over Earth or some major event that I don't super remember because it was back in the very beginning of the first book. But these aliens have forced humans to do this, as they force different planets to do this. They for a interstellar game show where everyone in the galaxy watches and votes on what people they want to win as they battle monsters and battle each other to try to be the last person standing and make it to the very end. It's an insanely fun concept of a book that works in so many ways. It's a really good, I think, intro into progression fantasy, which means characters get stronger and stronger as they go along, and into the lit RPG, which is essentially like video game elements brought into a book. Because characters have stat points, they can assign them in different ways, they get these powerful items. I mean, think of a human version of playing like Diablo or something like that, with this game show twist to it, where characters are going deeper and deeper, and it gets harder and harder as they go along, and they get this amazing magical loot, but it gets more wild and wacky, and a dark tone as well, that just works in so many ways. So let's talk about this book a little bit. Now, so this book had, all the things that I loved with the previous books, where we keep getting this fun progression to the story. We get these really entertaining power-ups and these upgraded enemies to encounter. The dialogue is constantly fun banter, and the tone is this awesome mix of really grim and really fun, which I love. I love when books can do something so diametrically opposite, and it gives you a really good feel for both of those things. And of course, as I've mentioned constantly, the audiobook narrator Jeff Hayes is just absolutely rocks, and he delivered his usual masterpiece of a performance. But the negatives here were hard for me to ignore, at least for me personally. And honestly, I think you're going to see a lot of fans thinking this book was either the best of the bunch or the worst of the bunch, based on what this book did so differently than some of the other ones here. And really, I think it's just a preference thing. And honestly, I bet that the things that I loved from book 3 are the same things that people hated from book 3, and the things that I didn't like from book 4, things that people loved from book 4. So for me, the story here was a bit of a mess. And I know that's kind of a harsh term, but it's kind of the way I perceive things. There's just too much going on. There's these major moments after major moments. You don't get any time to really deep dive into them. I mean, there's this moment towards the end of the book that I cannot quote. I wish I could, because it would ruin the entire book. But Carl is essentially recapping all of the insane things that have happened in this book. And it really just drove home how this book should have tried to do far less, and focused on a few narrow things, because we just kept jumping from these crazy big moments to crazy big moments, without ever slowing down to enjoy those moments or get any depth at all to them. And ultimately, it makes this plot rather incoherent. I mean, the setup for the story was nice. As we entered this book, I had a lot of high hopes. There's this floating castle far above where they can reach, and they need to figure out a way to get up there and capture it. That's fun. I like that premise. It makes sense. It's simple. Let's get from point A to point B and accomplish our goal. But then they throw in that there are these teams of other crawlers all in these little micro worlds trying to do the same thing to different castles. I mean, I'm trying to remember here, but you've got like one in the sand climate, you've got one underwater, you've got one in a haunted crypt. They've got to take them down individually, and then when they finish theirs, they can go help the others. And depending on the order that you take them down, it can have these repercussions for the other ones. There's just too much going on. And then there's this huge quest that they need to accomplish in the middle of this, which is the namesake of this book, and it's just too much. I mean, this mini dungeon thing that is happening makes you never really get too invested on what's going on in the now, and you're constantly looking forward to the future. It all just felt to me like it's set up for the next sequence to happen. And I want to be in the now. I want to feel what's going on. I don't want to feel like the author's just taking us on a ride and showing us and moving us on this linear journey that is like, let's just get there as fast as we can. And because of that, and one of the things that I loved most about this book is these amazing side characters that I've come to know and love in the previous ones. I mean, you get these characters that will kind of sit with you for the whole book or a large part of the book. They're full of life, they're fun, you get to know them, and even though you kind of don't know them at the beginning, by the end of the book, you kind of wish that they would go along with the character and you could know them for longer other than having to leave them at that floor. But in this one, because they only show up for a few pages here and there, and then they're gone from the story, you lose any sense of attachment to them, and that's disappointing. And ultimately, a lot of my problems here is just pacing. Just way too fast, way too much stuff going on, and it frustrated me as the reader. At the very end of this book, in the epilogue, I imagine is also something that's going to be polarizing, because something happens that I suspect many people love, but I saw it coming a mile away. It felt like something I saw coming from, pretty much the beginning of the first book. And because it was delivered in this way, it almost is like trying to surprise you, but it's not surprising, and ultimately came off just cheesy and cheap. It teases a future plot in the next book, or one of the next books, and I just know that it's one that I'm not going to enjoy. So that disappoints me and takes me out of a little bit of the fun of trying to go into the next one. But again, I think that a lot of people are going to be like wowed by that. They might be surprised by it, maybe because they haven't read a ton of fantasy books and they don't know these kind of things are going to happen. And they're really excited by it. But yeah, the epilogue really didn't sit right with me. And my last criticism, I promise, is that I'm really not a fan of, this is a bit of a nitpick, but when characters have a plan that the reader is not aware of. Now, this can be an interesting, storytelling device to throw into a story every now and then, but this book is just littered with these, and these moments just got annoying. Now, it's it's not a fun storytelling device to constantly use because you feel like you're out of the know, even though we have this inside look into the main character, and it's not a device that makes sense. It's a device just used to try to surprise the reader, and no real purpose other than that. There's great ways to fill the reader in while still leaving things unexpected, and I think Matt Dinniman could do a lot more of that going forward. Now, having said all that, I honestly still did have an okay time reading this book. I am focusing a lot on these negatives here, precisely because I know how great the series can be due to some of the other books that are out there that I've read. And I'm just praying that the next books in the series can harken back to what made the series great for me, because I know that the author has it in them. And I know that, and I'm so invested in the story, I so badly want to know what happens at the end of the story and how things are going to wrap up. I love these characters. I want the best for them. I hate some of these other characters. I want them all to die a miserable death. I want the, aliens that have forced these people to go through this horrific event to burn. And I feel like we're going to get it on this huge, interstellar, level, which just has me so excited. But I don't want to have to go through this, frantic chase in the books to try to get there. And I want to get back to what I really loved about books 1 and 3, which is a more, kind of straightforward plot that has the fun coming through it with characters that are going to stick around and way more focused. But do I still recommend this series to people? Yeah, of course I do. This is a wonderful series. Sorry for my coughing. I'll edit that out afterwards. Yeah, just wonderful series. The audiobooks are, they're hard to beat. I think that the only audiobook series that I think I like the audiobook narrator more is Stephen Pacey's production of The First Law. But God, that's good. I mean, I have read, way over 100 fantasy books in audiobook format. And this is, right up there with the greatest of the great, the Mount Rushmore of audiobook narrators. So check out the audiobooks. They are absolutely wonderful. You can also check out, I think it's Sound Booth Theater, they have this thing going on where they're doing a re-recording of the first book at least. They'll probably do more later on with a full cast. It's like a full production, think of like a play, but produced just for you. Every character's got a different voice actor. They're releasing them in little segments. So I think one book is the first book is split up into 4 or 5 different groupings. But man, I've listened to a little bit of it and it is incredible. So check it out. Or if you can't afford that, just get the regular audiobooks on Audible. They're wonderful also. So that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons: Anna G, CJ, Doust, Darren, Gregory, Jonathan, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, 𝗓𝗏𝗏, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Sydney Baker, Tahir, Anna, Andra, Blair, Brock, Evan, Fanixan, Harry B, Joe, Kat Mick, Maria, Michael Sugarman, Sky, TW57, 𝗏𝐏𝐸, and Zion. Thanks for sticking to the end of this video, and if you want to watch some more content from my channel, click over here and I've got some good videos for you. Thanks so much.